The answer would be power surely lies in all that is represented here of royalty and of majesty and of political clout and authority. It is in some measure a picture of the church within the world. If you would think about the church in the United States of America and beyond today, and you would say in relationship to the G8 or whatever it might be, where does power lie in these circumstances? Where does power now lie in the United Kingdom? You would be forced to say that the church is largely marginalized, it is trivialized, it has got some story about a dead man named Jesus whom they're all claiming is actually alive. That's the kind of picture of it. And that's why we need to remember what the prophet says in Isaiah 40, that our God brings princes to naught, and he reduces the rulers of this world to nothing. And Paul would have understood that, and so it is that he is able to speak for himself. There's a very interesting little interchange where, Agrippa said, I'd like to hear for myself. Festus says, you'll hear him tomorrow. So then the thing is convened, and then Festus goes into one of his speeches again. We can't go through it now. Blah, 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 blah. And eventually you get the impression that Agrippa says in the beginning of chapter 26, I said I wanted to hear him, Festus. I didn't want to hear you. And then Agrippa said to Paul, you have permission to speak for yourself. Let's hear from Paul. We didn't convene this to hear from you again, Festus. It's in passing, if you are the best man at a wedding, stand up, speak up, and shut up. It's not your deal. And if you are the master of ceremonies at an occasion, do the same thing. It's not your deal. Nobody really cares. All your job is just to say, here's Johnny. That's what you do. If you do more than that, you annoy everybody. And Festus is annoying. So Agrippa says, let's get on with the program. And into the program they go. And Paul starts off and he says, I was the LeBron James of Pharisaism. Everybody knows that. I was a religious prodigy. I was brought up with a kind of background that found all of its hope and all of its security in what God had said through the prophets. That's why we had our services in the morning and in the evening. That's why we offered our sacrifices and our prayers. And we anticipated that God would come and intervene again for his people as he had intervened when we were in bondage in Egypt and he led us out with an outstretched hand. That's the kind of thing that he's giving by way of background. And he puts a little zinger into it just to keep things going along. Verse 8 of 26, why should any of you consider it incredible that God raises the dead? Remember, there's some dispute about a dead man called Jesus, whom Paul actually says is alive. He says, and by the way, I don't understand why any of you would be so concerned about this. The issue wasn't the resurrection per se. The issue was the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. Paul says, but of course, to be fair, in verses 9 and 11, I was opposed to this. I persecuted this Jesus and his followers, and God intervened and changed my life. That takes us all the way up to verse 18. I'm trying to get to our scripture reading. I realize that Jesus is alive, and he's so closely connected with his people that to persecute his people was to persecute Jesus. And he arrested me. And he gave me a commission, and he said, I am sending you, Paul, to them, to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. In other words, he wasn't sending Paul out to staple Jesus of Nazareth onto their already held convictions. He wasn't sending the mighty apostle out in order to become a life coach to the intelligentsia and the influencers of her day. He was sending him out with a distinct and clear commission to proclaim the gospel. And it was the gospel which would bring about the transformation. And so Paul says, verse 19, we're now at our scripture reading, you should be encouraged. So then, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient. And I wasn't disobedient. And what I decided to do was because I was sent, where I decided to go was where I was told. What I was going to do is, as I've told you very, very clear, I was going to proclaim that the Christ would suffer as the first to rise from the dead and would proclaim light to his own people and to the Gentiles. Loved ones, just notice this and notice it carefully. It is the gospel that we're to explain to people. It's possible for us to press upon people the benefits of receiving the gospel, or to warn them about the dangers of rejecting the gospel, and in so doing fail to tell them the gospel itself. And if people, as they engage us in conversation, say, I'm not sure I understand exactly what it is you're on about. And we're bewildered by that because we told them, oh no, it's a wonderful thing, and this happens, and that happens, and the next thing happens. Or if you don't, there's hell to pay, and it's not a good idea to reject this message. And the people walk away and they say, what is that message? Don't assume you've told people the gospel till you've told them the gospel. And that is exactly what he's doing. And he says, I want you to know as well that there's nothing novel in this. This is just basic Christianity. And I'm not tailoring it to my audience. I am proclaiming the same message to small and great alike. I resist the temptation to give you an anecdote from, I think, the second volume of Martin Lloyd-Jones's biography, where he's preaching at Cambridge University and he gets an interruption from a young undergraduate at Cambridge. And now I've just intrigued you enough, you go buy the book, and there you go on from there. Suffice it to say that this all comes under the heading clear, all right? Clear. He says, I'm absolutely clear about this. I'm clear that it is the gospel that I'm to proclaim. I'm clear that the reason I'm doing it is because I've been sent. I'm clear about where I'm going. It's wherever I can go. And I'm clear about the fact that it is the same message for Paul, for small and great alike. Well, as he gets into his stream, Festus, who can't shut up, in verse 24, he interrupts Paul's defense. Perhaps he was beginning to feel the impact of Paul as he bore down upon them. Perhaps he was regretting the opportunity of having given him an opportunity to speak in the first place. But he interrupts, you're out of your mind, Paul. You're off your rocker. You're too clever for your own good. Now here's the kind part. Here's the kind part. Notice how Paul handles this. First of all, he handles it respectfully. Respectfully. Verse 25, how does he refer to him? I am not insane, most excellent Festus. Now, he's the one who says, when he writes to Titus, that you're to slander no one, that you're to show proper respect for those who are in authority. So at least we know here that he's true to his own word. He's not being funny in this. He recognizes the place that is given to Festus, and he addresses him respectfully. He addresses him candidly. Candidly. He doesn't pull his punches. He says, first, I'm not insane, and what I'm saying is actually true and reasonable. That should tie you back to Wednesday. In other words, it is rational. Rational. Respectfully, candidly, skillfully. Verse 26, his legal training comes in. Now he brings in the king, who of course is then the king is in his counting house. And he says, the king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. In other words, even if I can't speak properly to you, I can speak to him. I'm convinced that none of this has escaped his notice because it wasn't done in a corner. Christianity is open. Christianity does not take you into back rooms on State Street. It doesn't take you into deeper and deeper darkness. Christianity takes you into light and into freedom and into liberation. Therefore, this has been done in a corner. Clear, kind, and finally compelling. Compelling. 3 words that begin with K. Just a joke, just a joke. All right. Because what he does is, having referred to the king in the third person, he now addresses him directly. That is an absolute no-no. You're not supposed to do that. It breaks the bounds of normal accepted practice. The prisoner does not address the judge. But he decides, I might as well go for it now. I've gone this far. What can he do to me? Chop my head off. Verse 27, King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? And then this wonderfully endearing little nudge in the right direction. Come on. I know you do. I know you do. See how wonderful that is? He's not standing with some big sign outside in the street, undermining the government and the authority of his day because of the disruption and the chaos that is represented in the Herodian heritage. No, I bet you believe the prophets, don't you? So Agrippa turns the tables on him. He says, well, I got a question for you, Paul. Do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to become a Christian?